Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is Jack Skeels, and he is a former think tank management scientist who's bringing a whole new counterintuitive, I'd say, way of thinking about managing. And he was a researcher at RAND. He's managed big teams at Blitz Agency, and he ran Sapient's LA office. And he's got a new book out called Unmanaged, Master the Magic of Creating Empowered and Happy Organizations. And Jack, you know, I am really excited to talk to you about this because one of the things that I do like a lot is counterintuitive things, you know, like stuff that we wouldn't necessarily intuit, but that actually works. So how about you start by saying a little bit about what you're talking about here in Unmanaged. And then I want to tell you a quick story about something that stuck with me from a plane ride that I took years ago.
Okay,
cool. That relates.
Cool. Well, great to join you too. Thanks for having me on the show, John. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think that the book has been a journey of several decades for me. Really, just I'd always looked at managers. I started off early as a programmer in my career, and I never understood what managers did. Okay, I mean, I literally was like, you know, you're not teaching me how to do my job because I know more about programming than you these days, and that kind of thing. And I think I never really ever lost that. And eventually I had to just do something with it. And I ended up working at a think tank for a while. And I got to spend time studying how teams operate and how they should operate and what should managers really do. And it was just mind blowing how much great research there is out there that nobody knows about. And so I was going to write a book, but I'd never done it. And I'm that kind of person. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to manage if I've never tried it. And so we've tried it for the last 12, 13 years. It works great. And so the book was born. That's where it came from.
You know, that's one thing I love about books is 12 to 13 years of hard-won experience right between these covers, you know. That's cool. So it's called Unmanaged, which kind of hints at what I think is the counterintuitive angle. And I'll tell you, I think it was on a plane. It doesn't really matter, but I met one of the top strength training coaches in the world several years ago. And just an interesting guy to talk to. You know, it's not, I'm obviously not a big strength trainer, but he was very, very interesting to talk to. And one of the things that he said is that he could get people to do anything to get stronger. Like, people would just do anything except do less.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because part of the thing when it comes to really serious strength training is you've got to take some days off to let your muscle repair. And that was the thing he had the absolute hardest time getting people to do. Now, that does sort of relate to your thesis, doesn't it?
Completely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're hitting on a key element here, which is so the book, the title Unmanaged means it is meant to provoke the question of what if we managed less? Right. In other words, because it kind of sounds like, oh my God, that group's unmanaged. It's going to be a disaster. Right. Yeah. And in fact, we start out with a very fun story about how we removed managers from a big, bad project and the project got better. And this is known, you know, that this works that way, though not known by most people. I think one of the key things, and you hit on it very well in your story, one of the key ideas in the book is that I, as a manager, I often do much better by giving it a rest. Like you said, you know, essentially because people don't understand managing well. I think they overmanage because they want to feel like they're managing, just like your workout analogy is fantastic, by the way. Right. And in that the idea that I need to do something managerial, almost all managerial activity, unless it's really well crafted, is counter to productivity. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a real simple example so your listeners get this. And we're gonna go back to simple factory days. I've got a 10-person department and we make widgets. One person makes one part. We pass it along the assembly line. And it's my department. I'm the single manager, and my boss expects my department and my people to get 200 widgets done per week, right? And so if everything's running well, the best thing for me to do is nothing, okay? But if I feel like I need to be a manager all of a sudden, I'm going to go call a meeting, okay? I'll call a meeting. I'll call 3 meetings a week or something like that so I can do managerial talk and that kind of thing, or go around and say hi to people, even stuff like that. And so productivity drops because people aren't working, right? Because they're actually spending time interacting with me. I'm taking away and my boss calls and said, you only made 180 widgets last week. What happened? I said, well, I don't know. I called some meetings. No meetings. Don't call meetings. Just let them work, So that idea that it has to be a very carefully crafted activity from a managerial perspective to actually not reduce productivity in some way.
Yeah, which is just counterintuitive, just sitting and doing nothing is one of the hardest things for people of all time.
Yeah. Congratulations, you're promoted. I used to think about it as being a lazy manager because when I went into management, obviously very quickly in my career, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to try and not be that asshole manager that's like all the other managers I knew. And I ended up doing so little. You almost had to figure out ways to look like you were managing without doing anything, sort of thing. Yeah. It's really tricky thing to get your head around that, because a lot of times people come from the worker, right? They were a worker and they get promoted.
Often. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so you're like, well, hey, I contribute 40 widgets a week to this team's productivity. And you just made me a manager because I'm so productive that way. And now I don't, my best move is to not do anything and let other people make widgets. Right. Yeah. And so I'm using extreme examples, but it's kind of interesting the way that the very big mind shift, and we go into it in the book and talk about the need to, sort of tamp down your innate need, your human need for validation as a manager. Like you feed on this validation that I've done something managerial, therefore I must be a good manager. I'll tell you one last little piece, which is for a while back 5-6 years ago, I would ask managers, we'd do these little manager sessions as I was trying to get inside of the head of people as part of getting ready for the book. And I would say, are you an aid to productivity? And everyone would nod. Yeah, this is my job is to make things more productive. I said, what are all the things you do every week to make things more productive? And it was a list of things like that. Well, I hold the status meeting every week. I make sure everyone submits a report and you look at the list of things and none of them actually enhanced productivity at all. They were just things that managers were doing, kind of thing. And they honestly thought that was their definition of their contribution to productivity. Very, very strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's that's why I think it's really counterintuitive. It goes against what people just naturally are drawn to. And, my dad was on the podcast. I'm really glad I had him on before he passed, and we were talking about his time in the Marine Corps, and I'm going to get the things wrong about this. So anybody that really knows what they're talking about in the Marine Corps, please forgive me. But he had a platoon of guys, I guess, that were going to be the color guard marches because, I think Sato was coming from Japan to Okinawa, and it was his first visit since the war, and it was this really big deal, right? So they had a color guard from each of the services, and my dad was in charge of the Marine Corps color guard. And the head dude called all the leaders like my dad over and said, all right, I want you to march your men, over to the parade ground and get them ready, right? So my dad called his sergeant up and said, all right, take the men over there and get them ready. Right. And then he walked over and lit a cigarette because he was a Marine and he smoked it in those days. And the guy who was in charge of the whole thing, like, came over. He's like, Lieutenant Bates, don't you think that you should be marching your men over there? And he said, well, the Marine Corps wouldn't have given me a sergeant if I was supposed to do it, that's his job. Right. And he was very clear about that from his military experience of letting people do their job, and help them be in a good, a job that they do well, and help them do it well, but like, get out of the way. You don't have to be the one to march them over there. That's his job,
Yeah, I think there's a whole idea in there as well. Great story. There's a whole idea in there as well that it's this idea of managerial exceptionalism, right?
Yeah.
That somehow managers are far better at something than the people below them. And granted, it comes from, in part, that usually the best in that class gets promoted to manager. So there's some truth to it. Yet that doesn't mean that everyone else is so horrifically horrible that they need to be overmanaged all the time, right?
Right.
And you think of, I tell a story in the book about a manager, a guy who owned a small company of 20 sort of MacGyver, clever engineer dudes. And he kept on trying to schedule their week for them. And he was doing such a horrible job at it. And he asked me for advice. And I said, let them just do it. I mean, all this is just working out a schedule. We all, we figure out how to arrange our Saturdays or plan a party that we're going to throw. We're all pretty smart at doing a lot of things. And a lot of times you don't need a manager to do it for you. Just tell people to do it,
Yeah. 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 And that's a hard thing to do. My friend, Mike McKelowitz, has a book where he talks about that as an entrepreneur, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs listening. Mm-hmm. And he says that actually Superman is, in his words, an asshole, because he always shows up and saves humanity, right? And never lets them work it out themselves, right? And if you as a manager, or you as the person running your organization, are always showing up and doing it for everybody, then you're actually being kind of a jerk,
That's well put. I use the term firefighter a lot, right?
Right.
Because it's that same sort of thing. I'm going to go rescue my team from the opportunity to learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Superman's a better example. I think I used to use it. We actually had one of our clients had a project manager who was just over the top at that stuff. It was a woman, and she had a Superman tattoo on her back, like a big one,
there you go. Wow.
18 inches wide kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Just watch out if you ever don't hire that project manager.
Right.
But that whole idea that somehow these heroics are, I use firefighter because for firefighters, being a quote unquote firefighter is highly discouraged. Okay. You don't go running into a burning building to save the baby. That just doesn't happen. Right. That's like, I don't know if it's a fireable offense, but it's not a good move, right?
Yeah.
You work as a team, you work carefully, you work methodically, you follow the rules, because that's what keeps people alive, right?
Yes.
And it's that same sort of thing, is that in believing in believing in your process, having good process for a team, and also believing that the team is qualified to execute well, and putting the trust in them. That's so hard to do, though. I think the other model we pick up, it's interesting you mentioned your dad, is as when we're parents, right? We have this period of time at which, it's like, don't cross the street without looking, you get used to this model that the deep caring for a person or a group of people turns into kind of some dictatorial behavior, right? So,
right. Yeah.
And we as humans, when we have that dictatorial behavior laid on us, we actually we revert back to, that 9-year-old trying to cross the street kind of thing as well. So there's some hard patterns to remove.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did do a course, really, really interesting course called the Wisdom Course. And one of the things that we spent some time working on was looking at the age of our conversations. Like,
oh, awesome.
you
I
know,
love it.
so
I love it.
there's two different ways into that, as I remember it, is, one is, I'll go to the basic one first, but one is like your family, right? Like, why can your family drive you crazy with stuff that if somebody else did it, it wouldn't bother you at all, Well, it's because your conversation with your mom and dad and, maybe your brother or sister or whoever, that started before you even had words. And back when you had very little volition over what you were doing and didn't even have very good control of your fingers and right. So, when you walk in and your mom says that thing that drives you insane, you revert back to like the 5-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And you don't do that with people at work that you met. And that conversation started when you were both in your 30s,
Yeah.
That's a more adult conversation. And then the other angle on it was things like how we just get way more sophisticated at saying things like, I don't wanna, right? Like people will, why? But that's not for me, right? That's just a really sophisticated way to say, I don't wanna, right? So it was really interesting to look at the age of the conversations and see where in the workplace, people could be bringing that 5-year-old conversation that they're used to having with their mom to their manager, or the manager bringing that conversation of, hold my hand while we cross the street to the fully grown, person they're managing. And that stuff doesn't work very well.
Yeah. It's interesting. You're bringing up something, inevitably when one's writing a book, when you've got a lot of research it's based on as well. I want to get a lot of anecdotes in there, and there are a lot of great stories and the like.
Yeah.
A little piece of research that did get cut out, unfortunately, plays right to that, which it's very interesting. The difference between being told you need to do something and being told you need to do something and how is massive. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I can
so,
imagine.
and a bunch of different factors, both in terms of motivation and the like. But one of the really interesting things is if you look at it from a learning perspective, right? Now, does someone feel like they can improve quality? The way they measure this is if I learn, I produce better work, right? So quality goes up, right? And so if I tell you what to do and tell you how to do it, and then give you feedback, which would normally improve your learning, like it should be more red or something, or 2 inches long or whatever, that kind of thing. If I tell you what to do and how to do it, no learning occurs. Okay. Yeah. And in fact, actually the data show a slight decrease in learning, right? If I tell you what to do and let you try and then give you feedback, learning jumps up dramatically, right? And so this is that idea behind the using two things we do talk about in the book. One's called authority, which is here's what needs to happen. Okay. And back to your Marine example, the soldiers need to get over to the other field there and get lined up. Okay.
Yeah.
And the bad version of that would be the soldiers need to get lined over the field and lined up there. And so what you should do first is you should actually get them together and tell them that I want you to cross the street over there, that kind of thing. And you've got a bunch of unhappy people when you do that. And that's something that it's a hard thing to unlearn, partly the parental thing, right? Like, we've all had that, like, at some point we were at some age 12 or something like that. And when dad said, hey, be careful when you're crossing the street, you're like, don't tell me to be quiet, that kind of, I know better
already.
Yeah. So we have that tendency to overdo that, and overdoing it just, essentially it breeds this cycle of, thanks for the feedback, but I did what you said and it didn't work. It's back on you. Right. Okay. And then eventually that turns into, hey, we need to get X done. And the person says, all right, tell me how you want me to do it. All right. And so now we've decreased motivation, decreased, quality of work goes down, productivity goes down, all because I can't just control myself and separate this idea of authority, what we need to get done, from the idea of control, how I think, how it could be done. Right.
Yeah. So the book is great. I love your tone. I love your stories. if someone were to take something out of it, what would be, I mean, I don't want you to give the whole secret away, right? But what,
we don't have time.
yeah, exactly. We, like, okay, so I've got to maybe think about, not doing stuff more often. What are some things that I can do to be a better unmanaged style manager?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One of which is just too long for me to answer, just
Yeah.
as a good answer. But I'll
Mhm.
mention what it is, which is what we did is, if you really believe what I say, this counterintuitive idea that you're almost better off not doing anything, right? As a manager, do no harm, right?
Yeah,
The
right.
question
Yes.
is, when can I do something, and what does that look like, right? And so
Yeah.
the answer is there really are some key managerial moments, and we
Yeah.
identify 4 of them. We call them the why, the what, the go, and the grow, and give examples of how to behave in those things. So that frame is in the book and the like, and
Yeah.
but I think the more generalized, I do this in the last section of the book, the more generalized thing that you can do as a manager is go from making statements to asking questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'll give you an example. I just was using that example. We need this by Friday, and here's how I'd like you to do it, is the wrong way. Okay. That's the
Yeah.
statements version.
Yeah.
And the questions version is, we need to get this done by Friday. What do you think we need to do to get it done? And what do you need from me? Okay. And
Yeah.
this also, you see how that inspires learning all of a sudden. Okay. And
Yeah.
like your dad could say to that sergeant, say, hey, we need to get them over there in the next 15 minutes. What do you think the best way to do that is? Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you need anything from me to help you get that done,
Yeah.
right? And the sergeant's like, no, I got it, thanks, it's all
Yeah.
mine. And in that moment, in that single moment there, I just handed control of that to that person, and we have a contract now that they said, unless I let you know, I've got this. Okay.
Yeah.
And now they're going to feel responsible for it. And a lot of people use the word accountable, which is a horrible word, but they become, if you will, personally accountable to themselves, that I said I would do it for Jack, and therefore I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. The use of questions, ridiculously powerful. It can be abused, but in general, once you learn how to and I spend some time talking about that, how to use questions well, you'll become a rock star, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm just struck by the inherent respect that it shows versus telling someone, saying, okay, we need to do this. How do you think we should do it?
Yeah. There's a book, I want to recommend it after you read mine, of course. After you just read mine. It's called Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein. And he opens the book, and humble inquiry is in asking questions in a humble way, right? And he opens the book with a story about a surgical team that had a massive failure during an operation and everything like that, because of power hierarchy. Like, no one wanted to question the surgeon. The surgeon didn't want to ask questions of anyone else because he felt he needed to be powerful, etc. Where the inability for people to realize that other people have perspectives on what's going on that may be valuable, and all that kind of thing can lead to colossal, fatal disasters and the like. And so that, I think that's really at the core of understanding what I have to grow. How do I grow as a manager? Is by learning how my people think, right?
Yeah.
Not making it about how I think, but learning how, and I'm going to teach them how I think too, but let's learn how they think. Let's develop them. Let's make them think like me, right? I'm going to ask them the question I would ask myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like there's a lot of, when you're a really good manager, it's kind of like being a good coach.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
You're there for them. You want to see them succeed. You're asking them, what do you need from me to succeed? How can I help you succeed? And yet you're letting them be responsible and take that accountability for their results so that they can learn and grow and better themselves and succeed and own it. Right.
Yeah. I think it's one of the better examples. I didn't use it in the book, and I debated. I use it in some of our training classes as well. But if you think of like a pro football team or something like that, which is the sport I love, the receivers coach or the quarterback coach, okay, they don't go, they don't run out on the field and go, hey, on this next play, you need
You're
to,
right.
It's more of like whatever I can give you before you get into the game situation, that's what I've given you. Right.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions for me during the game, you let me know. Okay. Or if I see something, I'll let you know. But in general, I'm going to believe in your ability to execute. And if we haven't done the work to get you there, then we'll do it next time after this game. Right. And it's a wonderful, the thing about those organizations is they're highly tuned managerial organizations, right? Because if you don't manage well, your team loses and you're out. And so the funny thing is they treat, look, you've got head coaches being fired, mid-season now and stuff like that. And granted, they move the talent around as well, but essentially a lot of times the talent stays and the coaches move on, right? Then they recognize that the good managing matters often more to the talent's success than the talent itself, right?
So now I have a question for you. I'm not a big football guy. I'm not a big sports guy. I like surfing, that's about it. But is it Manning that has all the Super Bowl championships?
Tom Brady does.
Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So because some quarterback has more Super Bowl rings than any team.
That's Tom Brady. Yeah.
Tom Brady. So that's the guy. Yeah. So I have got to believe that Tom Brady is a phenomenal leader and manager because he's been in multiple teams, multiple situations, right? It's not that, it's because he had the best defensive line or, it's because he had, no, he was in all these different situations and managed to pull a Super Bowl ring out of it for him and everybody that was with him. Do you know anything specifically about him and his style?
Well, I'm not sure. Part of it is, he is on the execution side, right? Having a superstar is a superstar, right? One of the interesting things is his coach in New England, Bill Belichick, is actually on the chopping block now because Brady's no longer there, and Belichick has had a couple bad seasons, and it's starting to look like the thing that made Belichick seem like such a great coach was Tom Brady, right? Okay. In other words, it may be that Belichick knew how to stay out of the way of Tom Brady and amplify what he did, right? But without that talent, then there are coaches that can make a team something more than what it is, right?
Yeah.
I think probably the next step down is not making a team less than what it is, right? So if you got a superstar, just stay out of the way and make sure he's nurtured. But I'm not sure about his. I do listen to him occasionally on he has this Sirius XM radio show. I feel like Tom's very caught up in Tom. Okay. So it's not necessarily a strong leadership characteristic. But he seems like a good guy. Yeah. And certainly a talent. Yeah.
Well, he certainly has to inspire something to be able to go from team to team and still pull that off. Right.
Yeah. So we don't see, you don't get in the public persona is not the same as the locker room persona. Right. So I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, this brings up something I'd love to get your just thoughts on. One of the things that I talk about a lot is talking to your people like they're great, no matter how they're behaving in the moment, right? Like even if they got terrible results, saying, Frank, you're brilliant, and this work does not capture your brilliance. What do you need from me? And I think that, that's one of the great leadership and probably great management characteristics that I've noticed in the people that I've supported and worked with is people that are able to authentically, genuinely speak to someone's greatness, even if in the moment they're not really in it. You know what I mean? In their greatness.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point. There was someone years ago who told me, uh, it was just sort of counterintuitive. Is as a manager, you want your people to win as individuals, and you want the team to lose together, right?
Yeah.
And so
Well, that's yeah.
essentially, you see what I'm getting at. So and it goes to that question thing that I was talking
Mm,
about, right? Which is, so I'm standing next to, Jonathan, and we're looking at the embers of the little disaster that happened, and I can opine on it, right? I can say, well, that was a shit show, man. I hope we never have that happen again, right? I guess that's us together. But I can go to questions and it can get really cool. I can say, wow, what didn't we see in that? Okay, what
yeah.
changed from our expectations, and what is it that we need to do next time better in this situation? What do you think? What do you think you would do differently next time, right? But
Yeah.
making it, trying to keep it as a let's figure out how we all learn from this thing, because
Yeah.
that's what failures are. They're an opportunity to
Yeah.
learn what you can do better next time, and if you use them as that, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
They improve the team, and you do it as a team and a group. And what could we have done to help Jonathan not have that go on his watch, right?
Yeah. Right.
That kind of thing. So I think the going to the how do we look, it doesn't need to be said that everyone's disappointed, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be said that
Yeah.
it's a failure, right? That just
Yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
People are pretty interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's for sure.
so you've had a lot of experience in a lot of different places and managing a lot of different people. When it comes to what this podcast is, focused on, leadership communications, do you have any good stories of, great leaders that you've worked with, or moments when you had a great communication or received a great communication and that we could learn from?
Yeah, I think I did have a great manager at one point who I probably didn't appreciate, certainly did not appreciate as much as I could. And he
Mm,
exhibited a lot of that, do you guys understand the problem? What do you need from me? Um,
yeah.
go for it, right? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. It was a small team, like eight 10-person team, bunch of
Yeah.
engineers kind of thing. And that was, I learned, he's still a good friend, and
Yeah.
as well, Tom, if he's listening, Tom Winfrey.
Yeah. Hi, Tom.
Um, I think
Love people like you.
the, there's a, there's a bigger problem with leaders in communication, and it has to do with leaders thinking they're communicating when they're not, right?
Mm,
And I
mm,
think there's a lot of emphasis on inspirational leadership, right? Being an
yeah.
inspiring leader or charismatic leader or that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
I think the thing that leaders underemphasize and need to emphasize more is making sure people understand the way that they view the situation and the world. And this is
Yeah.
what we call the why moment in the book.
Right.
It's a central principle of Japanese management theory, right? And to give you
Uh-huh.
an example, one of the I think it wasn't Yamaha, it was I think it was Suzuki. The
Mm,
CEO of Suzuki had they're coming out with a line of racing motorcycles. This is like 40, 50 years ago or something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And he was sort of being the Steve Jobs to that. In other words, like, no, that's not good enough. No, it's not good enough. And
Right.
people were getting really frustrated. And he did one of the first big acts of this thing is he took his engineers out to the track and he said, okay, kneel down on the corner right next to the track, and I want you to put your hand on the ground, okay? And I want you to feel what it feels like as the motorcycle goes by at speed, okay? And let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And they kept on doing that. And eventually everyone could sort of hear and feel what he was hearing and feeling around
Yeah.
it. And they said, that's what we're aiming for. We're trying to, like, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
No rattling or what, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's that they call it ba. It means getting all of us into one place, one way of
Bah.
thinking together, right? And it can, again, I'm not trying to overemphasize the use of questions, though I don't think you can overemphasize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really comes from the situation, the leader saying, all right, so we're going to do a new initiative this year, XYZ. And instead of spending 15, 20, 30 minutes with a PowerPoint and blah, 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 start saying, what do you guys want to know about it? Okay. What do you want to know about what we're trying to accomplish? What do you want to know about how this affects your work? Let's do essentially sort of a town hall, and the sort of town hall technique where it's like anyone can bring up anything, gets people aligned and connected and thinking together, and it integrates people. And that, to me, that's leadership, because what I'm doing is I'm taking my vision as a leader and instilling it in everyone else. I mean, this is one of the big problems, is strategy sits on the shelf, is one of the things we say in the advertising and marketing business. People write strategy docs that no one reads. Leaders have vision that no one knows how to follow. Connecting the wisdom of a leader, the insights and all those things, and all you think of all the conversations a leader has with clients and people in industry that never gets into the building. These are all great things for the leader to bring in and get instilled in their people as well.
Well, and like you're making me really think about stories, right? Like leaders.
Yeah.
A lot of leaders, and I work especially a lot with very hard skills leaders, and they don't want to tell stories, and they certainly don't want to tell personal stories, but people want to know their leaders, and those conversations that they have outside of the place, that matter, that could inspire people, that's where you could really start to inspire people, is when you just tell them the real true story. And I think, picking up on what you're saying, tell them the stories that are going to inspire them and give them the vision and get them out there and have them put their hand on the track and put their head right down low and get that feeling, that I think that a lot of people have a mistaken thought that they should already be good communicators because they do it all day long. You know what I mean? And
they're bad communicators because they do it all day long.
Exactly. Yeah, right. There you go. And I think that, it was an enormous awakening for me to start really taking on communication. It was what I did for a living. My whole life, I was the chief evangelist for various software companies. And so I was always out there communicating and all of that. But I distinctly remember, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, but I distinctly remember the first time that it really dawned on me that I could go into a conversation with an intention. I mean, and in a way I had a skill, because I could go into a conversation without an intention and I could have a good conversation, but I could actually go into a conversation with an intention. And the first time I went to TED, I had two big realizations, because I didn't get the power of public speaking and the power of the soft skills till I went to TED that first time. And I saw that person, person after person after person, just unbelievable talks. And I had two big realizations. One was, that's powerful, that's really powerful stuff. And the second realization was, I haven't been doing that. I always thought I was a great communicator because I was one of the best communicators at any conference that I ever spoke at, but the bar was really low.
Yeah.
And there's no harm and there's no shame in, going, okay, I could be a better communicator, and how can I? And I think one of the things that's just really, really consistent from everything that I see and hear and read, and that makes sense to me, is your suggestion of asking questions.
Yeah.
I think everybody thinks they got to go in and give this inspirational speech, and it's possible that maybe the most inspirational thing you could do is go in and say something about what's happening now, and then say, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think the opening it up is really interesting. Your comments about stories are actually spot on, in my opinion. I believe, and there's research on this, though it's fairly old, so, and it never really got chased down as far as I know. There's this idea of intersubjective dialogue, right? Which is, if we talk about an experience personally, an experience, a way of viewing the world that we have that people can also think about in terms of how would I feel doing that. It's my subjectivity and their subjectivity.
Yeah.
Intersubjective dialogue has amazing effects. And I believe it's actually part of our sort of pro-social wiring that we developed over the last couple 100,000 years, right? It's the thing that makes me interested in how you fish for fish, and tie it to how I might fish for fish. And so the whole tool making and tool improving culture that is, we're massive tool improvers, right? And that's just something we don't even notice that we do that. But the fact that for me to recite facts and whatever, blah, 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 is one thing, but I engage people's mind in a very different way when I tell them about something I've been going through, an experience I've had. And like we talked about the bomb moment, those things, there's a something very complex that we unlock that connects us all. And that's, of course, the TED Talk format is built around that idea of a compelling, relatable story and the pathos and ethos in it and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You don't need to be doing TED Talks, right?
No. Make everything you do TED worthy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But right. I mean, I don't want to, I'm trying to not raise the bar too high for any given manager. Like, I'm going to practice for 3 weeks of what I'm going to say at the status meeting kind of thing. Right. But that comfort with, I think just the act of, I know the act of engaging in dialogue around that isn't entirely work focused, right? And is experience focused, creates way better engagement, creates better happy teams, all that kind of stuff. There's great research on that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, what I teach are principles to make people TED worthy all the time. And one of the principles is practice, but I get you're not going to practice for 3 weeks for this, stand-up meeting tomorrow, but, that storytelling and that connection and that ability to have a well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told story that's going to land something over there with them, that's how we've been doing it. That goes way, 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 way back. That's much older than Google. Yeah. So. Jack, I know we're getting close to the end of our time together here.
That went fast.
Yeah, I know it does go fast. And I really appreciate you coming. And I do think I love your ideas in Unmanaged, and I love that the fundamental thing of just like step back and maybe not do something. How hard is that?
Yeah. Very.
So. But before I let you go, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have? And let me actually first have you tell us where people can find you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Jack Skeels, and shoot me a note, connect with me, all that kind of thing. Follow me if you like. Of course, great podcasts like this, you can find me as well. And you can also find me at Agency Agile. That's agency and agile, all one word.com. And you can contact us. We do a lot of trainings and other techniques that help make teams and managers work really, really well together. And that's where a lot of the learnings in the book actually come from, the work we've done with over 200 organizations over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's pressure tested.
Absolutely.
Well, so what would you like to leave people with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've gone on a really cool journey through a bunch of topics in the book. And I think the big thing that, since you talk to leaders, is flatten the conversation, right? So you were saying, well, they need to tell their stories. the whole thing gets even better if everybody gets to tell their stories, right? And so I think that that's
100%.
In a way allow other people to be leaders, right? To take the reign. And this is one of those things, by the way, and I'm going to squeeze a second thing in there.
Yeah.
Is don't make it a beauty contest. Don't make it, I'm going to pick my favorite people to tell their stories. Yeah. Totally randomize it, put it in a spreadsheet and just take turns. Okay. Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Angela's going to talk this Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
And Angela's going to talk to us about something she feels passionate about and also give us a tidbit about what she thinks we should be doing better. Okay.
Yeah.
Boom.
Brilliant.
Everyone gets to do it. Right. And so that, I think that sort of flatten the storytelling, if you will, would be really cool.
And I couldn't agree more. And I need to get better at hooking these things together when they come out of my mouth. But I think one of the biggest reasons to tell stories as a leader is because you will be setting the example and your people will begin telling you their stories, right? And you've got to create that space and maybe pull it out of people, but be open to it. But that's one of the big points of telling your story is that you start driving up the stories of your colleagues and bringing them out. And that just has an amazing, amazing effect. And I love that. Absolutely. So flatten the conversation.
Yeah.
Great.
Very cool.
Well, Jack, it's great to have you join us. Thanks for joining me on speaklikealeader.show.
Well, and thanks, John. Just really, really great. I mean, literally the time flew by. So very, very enjoyable and great thinking, great topics. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And thank you too. And to those of you listening, thank you for joining us. And if you would do me a huge favor and hit the like button and maybe share the show with a few people, that would be awesome. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us, Jack. And we'll see all of you next time on speaklikealeader.show.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.